Hello, and welcome to the Real World Data Initiative, preparing to engage with health authorities on real-world evidence for medicines. This is an overview. This resource was developed by a cross-functional team, including multiple pharmaceutical company representatives. There are multiple stakeholder groups that can benefit from the increased use of real-world data and real-world evidence. However, there are several challenges. Regulators are cautious in evaluating real-world data for regulatory decision-making. There's also lack of clarity on how to engage with regulators. But most importantly, a lack of clarity on how we communicate on the quality of evidence generated from real-world data may be an issue. The expectations around quality management and reporting of real-world data may also not meet the current regulatory standards. There are a number of real-world data-related initiatives at TransCelerate. This socialization deck will focus on the Health Authority Engagement Initiative and Solutions. Due to the complexity of utilizing real-world evidence for regulatory decision-making, a cross-sponsor company and cross-functional team came together to develop Preparing to Engage with Health Authorities on Real-World Evidence for Medicines, a TransCelerate perspective. This is now available on the TransCelerate website. This document was developed to support pharmaceutical companies in the preparation for engagement with health authorities in discussions on real-world data and evidence. The Health Authority Engagement Resource was developed to increase health authority confidence in the use of real-world data and real-world evidence for regulatory decision-making by building trust, reducing barriers, and demonstrating fit-for-purpose use of real-world data. We hope this document will help build trust across pharma and regulators through meaningful dialogue with health authorities, reduce barriers by providing suggested approaches on how to prepare for research proposals, demonstrate fit-for-purpose global case studies that illustrate the current use of real-world evidence. This document, Preparing to Engage with Health Authorities on Real-World Evidence for Medicines, aims to aid sponsor companies in the planning of drug product research plans that deliver real-world evidence through the use of appropriate and very high-quality real-world data. What was delivered in this document were discussions on why to engage with health authorities, when is the appropriate time to engage, what to discuss during these engagements. It also references regional considerations in the US and in the EU, and provides specific global study cases that have been submitted to health authorities to illustrate these points. Preparing to Engage with Health Authorities on Real-World Evidence for Medicines, a TransCelerate perspective, provides an overview of best practices and learnings from the TransCelerate member companies on the use of real-world evidence in regulatory decision-making. It is intended to provide high-level experiential insights on how to engage effectively with health authorities consistent with their guidance. The table of contents lists the contents of this document from an initial high-level summary and background to specific points of interactions with health authorities. The document is presented with detailed sections that can be utilized independently. Finally, we also illustrated some of the concepts presented here with case studies from Europe, China, and the US. This flowchart illustrates iterative interaction between sponsors and health authorities. It describes critical time points that enable greater transparency when proposing real-world evidence studies. To exemplify, let's look at step number 5. It represents a proposed health authority touch point to assess whether a real-world evidence approach is possible and if health authorities agree with the sponsor's proposed strategy. Then you can move forward to the next step. While considering all of the details required in these interactions with health authorities, it is crucial to have a strong cross-functional team. Here we illustrate some of the functions that are essential to the development of real-world evidence proposals. One example is that of a physician. The expertise of a physician is required in order to accurately define the disease investigated, or to help with the understanding of drugs that will be compared. Another role that is very important is that of the biostatistician. They support in the study design, and they specifically help with sample size calculations and populations included in the study.
There were 3 case studies that were included in the Health Authority Engagement Resource document. The first case study is an example of the proposed use of RWE to help fulfill a pediatric commitment. Recruitment in the type 2 diabetes pediatric patient population is challenging, and based on current patient eligibility and current U.S. Pediatric Equity Research Act commitments, it's estimated that over 200 pediatric patients would need to be enrolled in a clinical trial, which could take approximately 6 years on average to complete. So there was a proposal to the FDA from multiple sponsors to conduct a hybrid RCT RWE design study comparing pediatric patients using a new type 2 diabetes agent versus placebo with the use of a proposed hybrid external pediatric control arm. The idea is that the RCT would be half the traditional size, and patients would be randomized 3-to-1 to the intervention plus standard of care versus placebo plus standard of care, and the placebo arm could be supplemented with additional historical patient data. So there would be about 500 real-world pediatric patients receiving standard of care from a large real-world administrative healthcare data source that would be added to the study. Through conversations with FDA, the concerns from the FDA could mainly be summarized as comparability of the RCT and RWD populations. And based on these interactions with the agency, FDA ultimately suggested that they would be more open to having flexibility in broadening RCT enrollment criteria as a better way to make the trials more efficient, rather than moving forward with an external hybrid pediatric control arm. Case study 2 is an example of the use of RWE for label expansion for a new indication. Dapagliflozin is a SGLT2 inhibitor approved for type 2 diabetes, heart failure with reduced ejection fraction, and CKD. This study, the dapagliflozin effects on cardiovascular events in patients with an acute heart attack, or DAPA-MI, utilizes 2 high-quality national population-based clinical registries from Sweden and the UK, including 6,400 patients. It's the world's first indication-seeking registry-based RCT. It's a phase 3 study to evaluate the safety and efficacy of dapagliflozin versus placebo, both in addition to standard of care therapy, for the prevention of cardiovascular death or hospitalization for heart failure in patients without diabetes who present with a myocardial infarction. The registries are used to identify and enroll patients, allocate treatments, and manage integral parts of study follow-up routines. Based on the feedback so far received from health authorities, the registry-based RCT design seems to be an innovative and initially accepted RWE design fit for registration purposes. Case study 3 is an example of the use of RWE for label expansion to include a new population. The approval of Prolia in China demonstrated that a well-conducted registrational RWE study can play a pivotal role in complementing the totality of evidence presented in a marketing authorization application to help enable drug approval in a new population. The global clinical trial data from the pivotal Freedom 4 trial was augmented by results from an RWE study which confirmed the effectiveness and safety of Prolia in clinical practice within Taiwan and Hong Kong. This was a retrospective cohort study utilizing the medical care administrative databases available through the National Health Insurance Database in Taiwan and the Clinical Data Analysis and Reporting System in Hong Kong. The results of this real-world study supported the conclusion that patient treatment outcomes and safety profile in a population of postmenopausal women in China would be consistent with populations in other regions, as observed in the Freedom trial. You can find more information on the case studies presented, along with the Health Authority Engagement Resources document on the TransCelerate website under the Real World Data Initiative. There are 2 resources available on engaging with health authorities when using RWE for regulatory decision-making. The first is the Health Authority Engagement paper, and the second is an infographic, which is a visual overview of the Health Authority engagement process. Now that you've heard a little about the Real-World Evidence Health Authority Engagement resources, please download the Preparing to Engage with Health Authorities resource and accompanying infographic from the TransCelerate website. We also welcome you to provide your feedback and to share your RWD case studies via email to feedback@transceleratebiopharmainc.com. Thank you.